As US forces draw down in Afghanistan, there are fears Afghanistan could descend into chaos. Our fears of Taliban in their Toyota 4Runners coming and taking over Kabul, are these fears genuine? Are these fears real? Can 350,000 strong Afghan National Army and the police protect the country? And if they can, then for how long? What will Pakistan's role be in the post-US Afghanistan? There's the Quetta Shura. There is the Afghan Taliban. There is the Haqqani network that Pakistan has encouraged all along. What role will they play? And finally, what is India's game plan? Will we watch from the sidelines, or can India outflank Pakistan? That is our show this evening. That is what we'll talk about. And it is my proud privilege to introduce two of the most authoritative voices on the subject to this August gathering at the India Today conclave. Ahmed Rashid, he's a journalist, he's an author. His book, Taliban, Militant Islam, Oil and Fundamentalism in Central Asia. It's a mandatory textbook for all to read, for all students of the subject across the world. His latest book, Pakistan on the Brink, is once again a textbook. Ahmed Rashid Saab. Ladies and gentlemen, it is also my proud privilege to introduce Minister of State for Human Resource Development, Shashi Tharoor, a man who clearly needs no introduction either to this gathering or in cyberspace. The minister is an author, he's a diplomat, he's a superstar on Twitter. This evening, his follower list is at 2.11 million followers and counting. He represents the Thiruvananthapuram constituency. The minister is a Stephanian. Mr. Shashi Tharoor. Ahmed Rashid Saab, with the drawdown happening in Afghanistan, do you see the Taliban roll into Kabul now? Is that what will happen?
No, I don't see that happening. I don't think that's going to happen immediately. Everything in Afghanistan, it depends on the outcome of the presidential elections, which will take place, in fact, 2 days earlier than your elections start, on April 5th. If these elections gain a degree of legitimacy from the majority of the Afghan people, then I think we could be well on the way for the new president in Afghanistan to reopen the dialogue with the Taliban that has got faltered, and for regional countries, to all the neighboring countries, to show greater faith and stability in Afghanistan's future. If, on the other hand, the elections are rigged, there is massive discrepancy, one warlord or the other, or one party does not believe that the elections were free and fair, then we could, the worst case scenario, we could see a multi-dimensional civil war. It would not just be Taliban versus government, it would be Taliban versus government versus half a dozen other groups who might well also be fighting the government. So the outcome of the elections is critical.
Okay. Outcome of the election is also very critical in India, Minister. You have an election to take on just 2 days after that 7th election start in India. What is India's game plan in Afghanistan? President Hamid Karzai has come here several times. He's requested India for artillery, for tanks, and he says with 40 tanks, I cannot defend all of Afghanistan. Perhaps Kabul, but not all of Afghanistan. Will we oblige?
See, so far we don't see that as our principal contribution, Gaurav. I mean, basically what we've done is we made Afghanistan into our largest single development assistance program. And we've done things that have made a real difference to Afghanistan. Like, it's our engineers who constructed an electricity cable 3,000 meters high from Pule Khumri to Kabul, which gives the Afghan capital 24/7 electricity. It's our chaps who built a road right across southwestern Afghanistan, the Zaran-Zalaram Highway, which has opened up a potential trade route into Iran. We have also done all sorts of small projects. We've constructed schools. The Indira Gandhi Mother and Child Health Hospital is the leading maternal hospital in Kabul. We have actually, we are in the process of finishing the new Afghan parliament. It should be ready by the middle of this year. And there is a hugely ambitious Salma Dam project, which will go on till next year. And we see these kinds of commitments as actually helping shore up Afghanistan, giving the people of Afghanistan the capacity to be able to determine their own destiny. For us, the elections are a vital part, but they're a part. They're part of this whole business of taking charge of their own future. We think the Afghan people have done somewhat better than some of the critics have alleged. And I would share Ahmed's feeling that the presidential elections, if they go well, could well see us moving forward in a very constructive way towards the next phase. But just let me add 3 very quick points that we are anxious about. Ahmed talked about security, briefly. My concern about security is that there is a terrorism problem in Afghanistan, and we in India are not sure how much it originates within Afghanistan. I think Ahmed might enlighten us a little bit about how much of what's going wrong on the terrorism front in Afghanistan is actually emanating from his side of the border.
Yep.
The second challenge we have is, he again rightly mentioned the regional countries must chip in. We think for Afghanistan to be viable, there needs to be respectable trade transit arrangements. Because after all, for 3,000 years, Afghanistan has been the intersection of trade routes from Central Asia, South Asia, West Asia. But now, because Pakistan doesn't allow transit from Afghanistan to India, the old Kabuliwalas of yore can only come by plane. There's no way through. And if Pakistan were to be committed as a regional partner and a neighbor to helping Afghanistan's economy and helping them stand on their feet, giving transit rights would be a very obvious thing they could do. The third issue is indeed the rest of the international community. Are they going to remain committed, as they have been since 2001, to seeing long-term security for Afghanistan? Or are they going to cut and run? We don't believe that they would responsibly do the latter. And we think that even the withdrawal we're hearing about of international forces will leave behind a significant residual presence. But Ahmed studies these things so much more closely, I'd love to hear from him on that. Those are the 3 things that we in India, I think, would consider the top priorities.
Will 10,000 troops that they leave behind, will they be sufficient? As the right question he said, what will Pakistan do, whether it's the Quetta Shura, the Haqqani network, the Taliban? Pakistan has funded them.
Let me just answer a couple of points that the minister has raised, and very necessary points. The first is that I think both India and Pakistan have acted with incredible maturity over the past year or so. We have a situation where President Karzai has in turn been to Delhi 5 or 6 times and tried to get the Indians to make anti-Pakistan statements and to deliver heavy weapons, as you said. India has refused to do that because India knows perfectly well that, first of all, the Afghan army is not certain if it's going to last, what the format is, and whether it's going to be able to sustain itself. But it doesn't want to rile up Pakistan. Likewise, Pakistan has not made any adverse, with all this rhetoric that has come out of Delhi when President Karzai comes here, Pakistan has not reacted in any kind of negative way. So for the first time in 10 years, or 13 years of the war in Afghanistan, we are seeing Pakistan and India acting, I think, very sensibly. And I hope that this could really move forward. We need a dialogue on Afghanistan at the foreign secretary level, at the foreign minister, the prime minister level. We need to much greater transparency between the 2 countries on what the other is doing.
Those are brave words. I mean, those are good words. But when you look at the situation on ground, Pakistan was directly involved in the attack on the Indian embassy twice. They've killed a defense attaché. They've killed doctors who were providing yeoman service to Afghan people.
There's no doubt that
there is no action against them in Pakistan.
There is no doubt that there has been a proxy war going on in Afghanistan. The Pakistanis feel very strongly that the Indians are also from Afghanistan are backing the Baloch dissidents and the Baloch separatists, a war that has been going on inside Pakistan also.
No, but is that true, Minister?
Since 2005.
Is that
Let
true?
me just finish.
Isn't it just propaganda?
Let me just finish. And certainly, without doubt, the Pakistan has had links with dissident Taliban groups like the Haqqani network, who have been, attacking the Indians with support from elements in Pakistan. I think there's no doubt about that. But look, this proxy war that the 2 countries have been fighting goes back right to the months after partition. And, we've seen Khalistan, we've seen Kashmir, we've seen other places. And at the moment, we need to wind down this proxy war. I think basically we're in a good position to do that if there is stability in Afghanistan.
But isn't Balochistan a bogey?
Not only that, I mean, I have the greatest respect for my old friend Ahmed, whom I've known for nearly 30 years. I have to say that there is no proxy war, because to have a war, you need two sides. And India has had nothing to do with the other side. He mentioned Khalistan, he mentioned Kashmir, he mentioned Afghanistan. In every one of these, it's Pakistan that has created proxies to go after Indian installations, Indian interests, and Indian territory. We are simply not interested in destabilization. In fact, we have a very sort of status quoist approach. We are very happy to see Pakistan prosper and be stable, and we're very anxious to see Afghanistan prosper and be stable. So we are really not interested in playing that game, Ahmed. And honestly, for us, we don't see Afghanistan as a battleground between India and Pakistan. We don't see Afghanistan as a country which need have in any way a sort of zero-sum equation in the Indo-Pakistan paradigm. I think as far as we're concerned, both India and Pakistan have a shared interest, and I think that's a view that you are not opposed to, a shared interest in seeing a stable and prosperous Afghanistan. And so when you said everything depends on whether things are stable afterwards, well, Pakistan has the greatest capacity to help ensure that things stay stable by reining in those elements on Pakistani soil who are promoting instability in Afghanistan.
And Rashid Saab, does Pakistan want peace in Afghanistan? And by Pakistan, I mean the all-powerful Pakistan Army and the ISI, sir.
Let me just say, look, all the neighboring countries want a stable Afghanistan. Nobody wants a repeat of the 1990s when, if you remember, all the regional countries had picked warlords to help and side with and fuel the civil war in Afghanistan. Nobody wants a continuation of the war in Afghanistan. And for the first time, I think all the neighbors are on one track. And I think Pakistan definitely, or what we've seen over the last couple of years, the Pakistanis, even though the Taliban leadership is living in Pakistan, the Pakistanis have far less authority and clout and control over the Taliban than ever before. The Taliban are very much, they make their own decisions and policies. I believe that if these elections are successful, if the dialogue with India gets going on Afghanistan, we should be giving these Afghan Taliban a deadline to move out of Pakistan. But most important of all, I think where the cooperation has to, I agree with you, I think we should open the road route between Afghanistan and India. India is signing a lot of large-scale contracts with Afghanistan, mineral development and all that. Pakistani companies don't have the capacity to do that, but Pakistani companies could become junior partners of these large Indian conglomerates to provide services and other such things. But clearly, India needs, and the region needs, this route to be opened once again. And I'm hoping
is the ISI on board?
Sorry?
Is the ISI on board? And even if the ISI is on board, look, will Mullah Omar or the Quetta Shura, that Mullah Omar sees himself as the Amirul Muslimin, will he be happy being just one of the stakeholders?
Pakistan faces at the moment 3 insurgencies going on at the same time. And the worst being the Pakistani Taliban in the northwest of the country, who have killed large numbers of soldiers and civilians. The army at the moment is totally preoccupied with the dangers of that Pakistan faces itself. And, that's why I think policy has changed. I mean, the famous saying by the former army chief that the internal threat is now far greater than the external threat. In other words, the sort of anti-India rhetoric that has been part of Pakistan's whole makeup over 50 years has really now dramatically altered to even within the army, which recognizes that we have to deal with this Taliban threat. We're still not being able to deal with it properly. I hope we do, but it needs a civilian-military partnership to be able to deal with that. And part of that dealing obviously means that we want to see peace in Afghanistan. If the Taliban see a chaotic situation in Afghanistan after April 5th elections, that is only going to fuel the Pakistani Taliban also. So the last thing the Pakistan army wants to see is a collapsed election in Afghanistan, chaos, a Taliban offensive on the major cities. All that will help fuel Pakistani Taliban.
Minister, is your appreciation...
Just on that point. Okay. There's a cynical view that says that it may be of interest to some people in Pakistan to see instability in Afghanistan because that could distract the Pakistani Taliban. They'll be tempted to cross the border and go and mix themselves up in that battle, thereby taking the pressure off the Pakistani army and Pakistani installations. What do you think of that?
Shashi, I think the fallout of continuing war in Afghanistan would be huge for Pakistan. We have an economic crisis, we have an energy crisis, and you would get an enormous influx of refugees. We still have 3 million Afghan refugees on our soil. And we can't integrate them into the economy because, you know, the economy is not able to integrate sufficient numbers of young Pakistanis. So we would face a huge humanitarian crisis on our borders. And remember, this time there'd be no UNHCR or United Nations or American help. Congress is antagonized. Karzai has antagonized the U.S. Congress. I think one of your big questions is, would the international community be there? It's a big question mark. You know, are the Americans going to continue funding the Afghan army? The Afghan army needs the salaries paid by the Americans for the next 5 to 10 years. Are they going to come up with the money? It's a big question mark given the complete reluctance of the Americans to get involved now anywhere.
So will America pay them, or is India willing to fund 350,000 strong Afghan National Army? Is it in our interest to ensure that army stays strong? Do we have the capacity?
Look, as Ahmed also said, we've been very cautious about getting into the security thing directly. What we have done, and what we have continued to do and will be proud to continue doing, is to train Afghan officers, Afghan army officers, Afghan Air Force officers, and Afghan police in India. So we brought them over in batches, we've given them extensive training, brought up their professional standards and sent them back. That kind of thing we can do. It's very different from sending military equipment or directly getting involved. And frankly, the kind of money that's involved in paying that many salaries and so on would be a fairly major decision for an Indian government to take. I would say in any case that would be seen by most as a collective international responsibility. After all, why did the international community go into Afghanistan? Not because of love for us or for the Afghan people, but because of 9/11, 2001. Yeah. When that happened, they said, oh my gosh, we've allowed this country by neglecting it to incubate this horrendous violence against us being the West. And therefore, let's go and sort of stabilize it so that they never do another 9/11 to us again. That was basically the logic of their intervention. Now, does it make any sense after expending 13 years worth of effort, blood and treasure and lots of treasure, I might add, to then pull out and let the next 9/11 again originate from some cave in Afghanistan? Does it make sense of the West?
What is India's appreciation of the situation? What does India see happening post the drawdown, end of this year?
See, we expect there will be a residual international security presence and that we believe it will have a valuable effect, even if it's not as large as it is now. In fact, there is an argument that a very large presence can be counterproductive because it provokes certain reactions. But a small presence and the capacity to intervene when necessary and to continue to cast a shadow on the security events there can be valuable. We ourselves, we've risked a lot of lives in these development projects I've talked about. We would certainly welcome the assurance that there is a calm security environment as we continue with our various development projects. So I think that we would very much encourage the international community to do this. We ourselves are very active in the Istanbul process. There are all sorts of confidence-building measure committees, and we're actually heading the one on trade and commerce. And we're pushing very hard for saying, look, come on, let's try and get Afghanistan's trade and commerce going, because if the Afghan economy recovers, it will help the overall process of stability. So we're doing all of that. Sorry. I was just carrying on giving examples, but I'm just saying we are committed in the longer term to Afghan stability and security and prosperity.
Look, first of all, India is not going to take on the white man's burden, if you like, or a colonial-type burden in Afghanistan. India knows perfectly well the Soviets couldn't do it, the Americans couldn't do it, NATO couldn't do it. I mean, why would India take on such a burden? I think at a regional level, what we need to do is we need a regional agreement of non-interference in Afghanistan. All the neighbors the 5 neighbors of Afghanistan, plus the 3 big countries who are not neighbors but involved, Saudi Arabia, India, and Russia, need to be involved in a regional effort to make sure that there is no post-election interference in Afghanistan from any side. And that dialogue... How do all
these countries ensure Pakistan doesn't interfere?
What?
How do you ensure Pakistan doesn't interfere for that strategic depth?
Strategic depth is something that is long gone and long over. It was a whimsical idea of one army chief, and it was completely thrown overboard by, it's still a call, if you like, by the extremists and by the fundamentalists, but it's not a rational argument anymore that Pakistan can seek strategic depth in Afghanistan. That period is over. And as I said, I think Pakistan is beset with so many of its own problems. It's not about to try and launch a takeover or influence future events in Afghanistan. Now, so the effort has to be regional. And for that, I would really like to see another proposal, what India can do economically to help the region and help Afghanistan, is perhaps the next government could think of the idea of setting up an investment fund, an Indian investment fund for projects in Afghanistan. And in that investment fund, not only Indian companies, but all South Asian companies who want to do industrial, agricultural development projects in Afghanistan could come and borrow money. Okay. Now, that would encourage, and perhaps you could enlarge that to include China or Russia or the Arab Gulf, and the investment fund itself could grow with more people contributing to it, etc. So what we need is a regional approach to helping stabilize Afghanistan. My complaint is that Pakistan has not done enough. India or Iran, all the neighboring countries have not done enough. We've left it to the Americans, and that's been a huge mistake, because the Americans have really failed us very badly. Obama has not been interested in Afghanistan sufficiently to be able to take up these issues of regional dialogue and all the rest of it. We saw a little bit of interest in the beginning when Richard Holbrooke was there, but after his death, we haven't seen an real American commitment to trying to broker a peace in this region. The region has to do more.
Okay. Minister, do you share Rashid Saab's confidence and optimism that Pakistan will play an active role in development of Afghanistan? At least it will not interfere. These terrorist forces that have destabilized Afghanistan over the past decades will not once again be there?
Look, we'd like that to be the case, but there is always a difference between what we want and what we're seeing on the ground.
What is your appreciation?
I'd agree with Ahmed that things have been calmer in the last year, that certainly the episodes you mentioned when the Haqqani network hit our embassy twice. The last episode was now 3 years ago. So it's not as if we're looking at a recurrent violent campaign against India and Indian interests, but certainly we have a perception that, if not in Islamabad, then certainly in Rawalpindi, this is seen as a zero-sum game, that Pakistan must somehow have a one-upmanship that keeps India out or keeps India down, and that India should not be allowed to do much in Afghanistan. And that, I think, would be a pity. I think if Ahmed is right that there is a new thinking going on, if this leads to a serious dialogue between Pakistan and India on Afghanistan, in which Pakistan takes initiative to say, look, we know we've done X, Y, and Z, but that we would like very much to inaugurate a new chapter, and what can we do together? I think that they will find India very receptive. I'm not in the foreign ministry, and what is more, as you said, our government is coming to the end of its shelf life right now, but a new government in India, because fundamentally there is consensus, I think, across all parties, a new government in India will remain committed to stability, peace and prosperity in Afghanistan, and will want to create a peaceful environment to do that in partnership with Pakistan if partnership is offered. So let me say, if Ahmed is right, I'll be the happiest man on this floor.
In India, perhaps most people would be. Some of these track 2 debates and discussions, there's talk of India and Pakistan cooperating on Afghanistan. Is that a pipe dream?
Sorry, can you repeat that? What is a pipe? I was trying to read the tweets behind you and I got distracted.
2.11 million followers, now you know how. Can India and Pakistan cooperate on stabilizing Afghanistan?
See,
or
we
is that a
believe yes.
pipe dream?
We believe yes. One classic example, which Ahmed agrees with, is this transit business. Let Indian goods go through Pakistan to Afghanistan, let Afghanistan get some benefit, let Pakistan get some benefit, and of course, open up the Indian market to Afghan goods and products. We used to be a huge market for Afghan fruit, Afghan petrol, and of course the itinerant Afghan peddlers known as the Kabuliwalas for centuries. This has been part of the tradition that has been sealed off by Pakistan's hostility. There's one example. I would say we can certainly collaborate even on security issues. If it's clear that both of us share a common interest in keeping the democratically elected government of Kabul safe and secure and in power, and we can exchange information and we can do our bits together, and we're not simultaneously sponsoring terrorist groups to come and do nasty stuff, then I think the sky's the limit. And certainly India does not see this as a zero-sum game. I really want to stress that.
So is that transit route through Pakistan to Afghanistan and back for minerals from Pakistan, is that from Afghanistan through Pakistan, is that possible?
Yeah, it's perfectly possible. I mean, it's a political decision that has to be made,
Exactly.
by both countries, basically, being able to open up this route, as you said, for. But you see, look, there are so many pipelines that are pending. We've got this pipeline from Turkmenistan, gas pipeline, bringing gas into Afghanistan, Pakistan, and delivering it finally into India as well.
So
now,
if it's a win-win situation, why isn't it happening? Why is it Pakistan on
It's
hold?
not happening
peace in
because of
Afghanistan.
2611. I mean, suddenly we started asking ourselves, are we going to mortgage our energy security, gas and oil pipelines to the people who could do what was done to us in Mumbai? I mean, we would essentially be spending a huge fortune constructing a major pipeline which would be a huge source of energy security for us, and it could be cut at will by people whom the Pakistanis could say are non-state actors beyond their control.
That trust deficit is so much, and unless that is addressed, there's no way you can move forward.
Well, I think if bringing peace and stability to Afghanistan is the first item on the agenda, and it can't be done without India-Pakistan cooperation. It certainly can't be done if India and Pakistan are going to be fighting over scoring points in Kabul against each other. I think, the mood is altered. Nawaz Sharif has made it very clear that he wants improved relations with India. He wants a new foreign policy. He's having a very hard time implementing that at the moment because of the internal threats that we face, which are very serious indeed. But I think, once we can get over this hump of the internal Taliban terrorism, etc., and we can pronounce a policy of zero tolerance for terrorism, which is where we have to move to eventually. Zero tolerance for all terrorism, whether it's Afghan-directed or India-directed or anywhere else directed. I think, then we can really sit down and tackle these issues. But a lot depends on the Afghans, don't forget. I mean, if the war is going to continue in Afghanistan, then all bets are off. Then, everybody will have to rethink their position.
There are questions for you, I'm told. We'll now open the house to questions. Please raise your hand. Ask your question. Tell me who your question is directed to. General?
My question is to Ahmed Rashid Saab. We see democracy getting more strong in Pakistan, but it can only be strong and effective if it is given that space by the military. So do you feel that there is a change taking place? Because that is fundamental to anything happening in Afghanistan. The policies are not going to be made by people if they don't have true power. So that is my question.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, the troubles we are facing, whether it's economic or terrorism, extremism, energy, has been the culminative fault of military regimes, which have essentially been anti-people. Military regimes have not served the people adequately. And I think the military itself now realizes that we need a consistent democratic pattern, a predictable democratic pattern. We need government to follow government, being elected, etc. Now, unfortunately, we still have very weak and very poor governments. The last government and even this government has proved itself very incompetent in many areas. But, we have no young people joining politics, for example. No young people wanting to serve the country through politics because it's seen as a dirty game, as corrupt game, etc., etc. So, there are enormous strides that we have to take yet. But I think we are on the right path. The immediate threat is to deal with terrorism. Only the reduction of these terrorist groups is going to allow the economy to grow, investment to come, etc., and the improvement of relations with the neighboring countries. And, I hope we are set on that path. But we have to be very decisive about tackling terrorism. There is no other way to go.
Thank you very much. Tackling terrorism is the biggest issue to bringing peace to this entire region, to bring peace to this region, not just Pakistan and Afghanistan, but also India. Minister Shashi Tharoor and Ahmed Rashid Saab, many thanks for being a part of the India Today Conclave.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Can we please have a big round of applause? I would request both Mr. Rashid and Mr. Tharoor to stay on stage while I call upon Mr. Dev Bhattacharya, Group Executive President, Corporate Strategy and Business Development Head, Aditya Birla Group. Please come up on stage and present a small token of our appreciation to the gentlemen here. Once again, can we please put our hands together for a riveting session by Mr. Rashid and Mr. Tharoor. Thank you.